holding this hearing and bringing us to this point. Your leadership on this is very, very important. And there is no real redundancy in talking about something so near and dear to the fabric of this society as is voting. I want to also thank the state legislators who've come here, those who are also on the Zoom with us electronically, for your participation, and if I might say also for your courage. This whole issue, Mr. Chairman, is an issue that there's been a lot of discussion about, but one of the things that's clear, and that is that unless we have real integrity in our system where everybody feels like their vote counts, we're never going to get to where we need to be. In fact, we will find ourselves repeating many of the problems and the issues of the past. Now, I don't want to be funny here, but this is almost like the old Yankee manager Yogi Berra once said, "Deja vu all over again." The issue of voter integrity, intimidation, and the burdens that are put on voters is something that's revisited itself in a mean and ugly way. Now, years ago, between the 1890s and the 1960s, there were real efforts at voter intimidation and denial. It all started, as we know, with the good old grandfather clause that said even though you may be free, you cannot vote unless your grandfather voted. Well, your grandfather was a slave, so he couldn't vote, and therefore you couldn't vote. And when that became so obviously ugly and intimidating, states changed up and created things known as the literacy test, where throughout that period of time, up until 1965, in many states you had to tell how many bubbles were in a bar of soap just to be deemed intelligent enough to go out and cast a vote. And when that came under further scrutiny, states changed it and said, okay, well, now you have to be able to recite the Constitution from beginning to end to be able to be qualified to vote. I just think that it is ludicrous for us to think that somehow now the things that we're facing, particularly in Texas and elsewhere, are not akin to the same laws that were put in place then with the same objective and the end result to suppress turnout and to, in many instances, deny the ability of all people to vote. Now, I know that these state legislators who are here have come here because they honestly and dearly believe in this concept of one person, one vote. So I was a little shocked earlier to hear accusations by some of my distinguished colleagues that the legislators from Texas ought to go back home and do what they were elected to do, like they were somehow abdicating their responsibility by, quote, denying a quorum. And yet, Mr. Chair, repeatedly in this committee and even on the floor of the House, there are attempts to deny a quorum because that's what you have the right to do. And you have the right to use every tool available as a legislator, whether you're in a city council, a state legislator, or in the Congress, to further your point. We do that all the time. So I think it's a little disparaging to suggest that these men and women are abdicating responsibilities when, in fact, they're using constitutional abilities and guidelines to do what they have to do. Mr. Chairman, I believe more than anything else that when we look at the disappearance of preclearance from the Voting Rights Act, when we look at all the problems that have started since then, we would not have been at this place had not the former president been declared the winner of the election in the state of Texas. That started an ugly ball rolling. And now all of a sudden there are these efforts to, quote, protect voters and protect their rights that did not exist, were not talked about, and did not get voted into law previously. This is a new phenomenon in an old ball game, and it's a phenomenon that, quite frankly, cries out for us to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and to pass H.R. 1, the For the People Act, so that we can put to rest once and for all these types of attempts. I've exhausted my time, Mr. Chair. I, again, want to commend you. I want to commend the legislators and want to remind my colleagues that as legislators, we have every right to use what's in the Constitution that we're governed by to advance our cause, even if it means denying a quorum. And I yield back, Mr.
Congressman Mfume, thank you for your excellent remarks, and I turn it over now to my friend, the ranking member, Mr. Sessions, for his time for questioning.